the legislation, we wish it had happened years ago.
Denise Roche.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's my privilege to speak to the second reading of the marine legislation bill. I take this call and I acknowledge that I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague Gareth Hughes, who's been the Green MP who has been ushering this bill through its first reading and select committee process. And he, no doubt, will have a lot more to say on this bill as it reaches the next phase, the Committee of the Whole House and the subsequent third reading. The Greens will be supporting this bill. This is, just to recap, this is an omnibus bill which amends primarily the two acts, the Maritime Transport Act of 1994 and the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf (Environmental Effects) Act 2012, the EEZ Act, the one that which was referred to previously that was had 37 pages of amendment to it in this bill. It's an omnibus bill which will also enable New Zealand to accede to 3 international maritime conventions and amendments implementing changes to another international maritime convention to which New Zealand is a party, and it makes changes relating to the making of maritime and marine protection rules. I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to the Select Committee members and to the officials and also to the submitters, and I note that there were 48 submitters from a wide range of organisations, including Local Government New Zealand, regional councils across the country, the Merchant Officers Guild, shipping companies, oil companies, port companies, and also from individuals. My colleague Gareth assures me that the Select Committee worked cooperatively to bring this bill to the House with the amendments that have been agreed to in the report. And personally, I'd like to see a lot more of that. So I encourage the government to think about other bills that are sensible, solutions-focused, that protect our special places and that support our people and are just. Quite unlike the previous bill that was in the House, the Social Security Benefit Categories Work-Focused Amendment Bill. And then we could look forward to more cooperation in the House and much better decision-making. But back to the marine legislation bill. This is the bill that will become the act that we should have had in place at the time that the Rena crashed into the Astrolabe Reef and leaked debris and oil onto our beaches and into our marine environment. At the first reading of this bill in the House, my colleague Gareth Hughes said that the Rena disaster and aftermath shocked New Zealanders, and I agree with him, and that our people were particularly shocked by the government's initial lack of response, its failure to act with speed, the lack of urgency and expertise and infrastructure that they supplied to deal with the environmental degradation the wreck was causing. And Gareth also highlighted in that first reading that the cost of cleaning up after the Rena was borne by the taxpayer to the tune of around $130 million because we were not adequately protected by our own laws, because we had not acceded through legislation to 3 international conventions that would have protected our taxpayers when this accident occurred. We do support this bill. In particular, we support the bill's positive changes, which I will get to soon, but unfortunately there are still some weaknesses within the bill which we raised in the first reading, which remain unaddressed, and no doubt we will get to them during the Committee of the Whole House. The bill doesn't go far enough to protect New Zealand against the environmental and economic risks of an oil spill. Even with this bill in place, it is likely that the taxpayer will still have to cover some of the cost of potential future marine disasters. For example, the bill doesn't sign New Zealand up to the International Oil Pollution Compensation Fund's Supplementary Fund. New Zealand is already a party to the 1992 fund, but not the Supplementary Fund, which would allow us to access over $1 billion for compensation and clean up if there was a spill from a tanker. The government has also failed to adequately fund the Oil Pollution Fund. And in the case of oil drilling, the government should be increasing the amount of insurance required for companies that wish to engage in oil drilling. The Gulf of Mexico spill cost $40 billion. However, our government is happy to allow oil drilling companies to have insurance of only $30 million. Who pays the difference? The government still does not have adequate oil spill protection within the country, and I note that this bill doesn't introduce compulsory shipping lanes, which would go some way towards highlighting where the superhighways are on the sea, and could even be used in my part of the country, where I live in the Hauraki Gulf, to steer ships away from the endangered Broodies whales that live in the Hauraki Gulf. And as I said in my first reading of this bill in the House, those whales, although they're endangered, have a tendency to live near the surface and so are more likely to be hit by ships, particularly when they're going fast. We do support this bill, though. In particular, we support the changes that outline the responsibilities of regulating maritime safety as a function of a regional council. The amendments that involve more comprehensive details for duties and requirements of harbour masters. We support the new section allowing for enforcement officers or constables to exercise the same certain powers as harbour masters and to restrict this exercise to occasions of special request or authority by a regional council. So basically, we support the regional council to have some autonomy here. Like the other parties in this House, we also agree with the alcohol limits that should be set for seafarers, and again, we do note that they are set at a lower level than what a driver of a car would get. The new section to create, we also support the new section to create an offence and prescribe a penalty for the overloading of a ship and to allow for consistency with the International Convention on Load Lines. This is an extremely important piece to have in this bill, as unstable loads or overloaded ships are at risk of further capsize. We're also pleased with the proposed insertion of a new definition of mining discharge to ensure that hydraulic fracturing or fracking would be subject to this legislation, and I think that is a major achievement. While fracking is not actually occurring in our oceans presently, it's good to see that this legislation is being future-proofed if an application were lodged. Our oceans are under threat, however, we believe this bill goes some way towards supporting some positive changes. It's curious, however, that this bill comes with 37 amendments to the EEZ Act, which was passed less than a year ago, which kind of highlights the sloppiness of the government's process of creating that bill. However, in summary, Mr. Speaker, we support this bill. We think it's a good bill. It's been improved through the Select Committee process. It doesn't go far enough in terms of protecting New Zealand's waters or the taxpayer from liability, but it does start on a process of improving things for our oceans.
Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very pleased to take a call on this Love Fest bill. Oh no, sorry, it's not that at all.